everyone. I hope that this nice rainy weather of Prague is treating you well. I'm joined. My name is Chris. I'm from L2Bit, as you can guess probably, and I'm joined today with this set of wonderful people, and we'll be discussing the paradox of decentralized chains that we are building with centralized front ends built on top of it, and we will try to figure out what is the thin line, and what is the balance that we should be aiming for. So, but first of all, before we begin, I would like our guests to introduce yourselves and tell a few words about yourself. Let's maybe start with Tess.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Tess. I work at OP Labs, where I work on optimism and the OP stack. And I work on product mostly with our platforms engineering team these days. So that means that I spend a lot of time thinking about how we run dev nets, test nets, roll out releases, do on-chain upgrades safely. And I also spend some time with our security council as well. So those are my focus areas. Oh, and before I worked on optimism, I worked on Cosmos stuff, on Stellar stuff, and then I worked on crypto at Twitter for a little while as well.
Thank you so much. Patrick?
Oh, hi everyone, my name's Patrick. Historically speaking, I'm an academic, a technical academic, and when I came into the Arbitrum Foundation, I thought I was going to work on research and education, but then the DAO happened and governance, and so I've spent the past 2 years mostly on more people problems and technical problems when it relates to governance. It's been very, different experience and very fun, but I have a lot more gray hair now. So yeah, it's been...
Thank you very much. DC?
Yeah, tell me about the gray hair. I'm 23 and it's so bad. Anyway, so I'm dcbuilder. I'm a research engineer at the World Foundation. I joined World around 3 years ago, and I was working mostly on Solidity and Rust and applied cryptography, mostly ZK. And nowadays I do things between grants, project managing, and some other things at the World Foundation.
Thank you very much. And Dominik?
Hello, everyone. My name's Dom. I'm one of the co-founders at Bob. It's quite funny. We're building on Bitcoin, but I originally joined crypto because of Ethereum. But my co-founder's really into Bitcoin, so I guess I had to make a compromise there. I also come from kind of an academic background. Met Patrick in London before. There was a good PhD crowd there. And right now I'm mostly doing the tech side of things. This new funny BitVM things and building a hybrid L2 and trying to combine our two passions, Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Okay, so let's start it. We are all coming one way or another from the L2 background, and with L2s there is already a controversy around the decentralization, because L2s, as you probably know, introduced some centralized elements on top of decentralized L1s. However, I think I wanted to ask Patrick to give us an analogy that I liked. I heard it several times already. How does it work? What is the overall idea behind rollups? And at least in theory, how it should work. So, Patrick, can you start with this nice story of why do you like rollups and how does it work together?
Just to set it up, though, I want to ask the audience 2 questions, which will hopefully motivate the example. So, just to everyone here, who lost money on FTX? Raise your hand if you know someone who lost money on FTX. Crazy situation, isn't it? This firm just took our money, then lent it out and invested it and squandered it. Then the other question is for Bybit. Who was surprised that Bybit was able to lose 400,000 ETH because of a Gnosis Safe UI bug? Yeah, exactly. It's nuts. And they're not an evil actor. It wasn't even incompetence. They just got rogued in many ways. It's unfortunate. So for many years, cryptocurrency exchanges kept getting hacked. And it's not because they're evil or bad. It's because it's just very difficult to secure billions of dollars in an organization. So many years ago, I gave this analogy. I think it was in 2019. It was at a Bitcoin Lightning Network conference, and everyone laughed at me. But I think it's still very relevant. So basically, what I've been wanting to achieve for years is that I want to go on a website, and it's a horse racing game. And maybe it's in Chinese, maybe it's in German. I don't know. I can't read it. But I want to play the horse racing game. So I take my funds, lock it into the game, I play the horse racing game, and then I take my funds back out. But I never have to trust the operator with my funds, but I can play the horse racing game. Maybe the rules of the game rug me, I don't know. The house always wins, don't they? but I just want to be able to play my game and not have to worry about anything else. And rollups actually do solve that problem in a really nice way, because instead of having let's say the horse racing game, they're not going to get a whole OPSEC team to secure billions of dollars. Now they can just take a tech stack, deploy it. You have this smart contract, the bridge, that holds all the funds and protects the funds for the user. And now as a horse racing game provider, I deploy the tech stack, build my horse racing game, deploy the horse racing game. Now you guys can all play, and I don't have to protect your funds, but I can earn a fee if you want to use my service. And to me, that's rollups in a nutshell, and that's why I'm really excited by it.
So the way I see it, your ideal world is the one in which, even though I don't have to trust this operator, he can be running any kind of centralized, shady app, but because it is running on top of decentralized stack and decentralized technology, I can be at least certain that my funds are safe, right?
Exactly, yeah. So, you get some confidence because of the tech stack itself.
Okay, but, so that's why we are here, why we all are here, to build this decentralized technology that is better than the systems that we had before, and to have safer, more secure systems. But I want to kind of break a bit this ideal world, at least maybe not break, but go into the nuances, and maybe kind of, unravel some controversies, and maybe we'll be able to explain why they are not that bad sometimes. I will start with Tess, because speaking of decentralized chains, Optimism is one of the first rollups that was very successful, and it's already building this super chain, which is a network of decentralized chains. However, people who are familiar with superchain know that in order to join superchain, a chain must obey to some rules. The chain must, give over their control over their smart contracts to Optimism governance. They also have to obey certain limits, certain parameters that the superchain enforces. Can you explain to us how exactly does it work, and how do you combine the fact that there are those decentralized chains and unlimited possibilities? However, why did Optimism decide on enforcing those certain rules and certain limitations on top of those chains in the first place? Let's dig into that.
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and there definitely has been some confusion about this in the past, so I'm happy to have a chance to speak on this. I think this really comes down to understanding the difference between the superchain and the OP stack, right? So the OP stack is open sourced, it's MIT licensed, you can fork it, you can change it, you can do anything you want with your own rollup, built on the OP stack. But when it comes to the superchain, there are just some practical considerations, especially around security. Because when we talk about the superchain, we're really talking about this vision of eventually having a bunch of rollups, a bunch of L2s, that ultimately to end users feel like they're just one chain, right? When we talk about a lot of the challenges that we see with scaling Ethereum through the rollup-centric roadmap, a lot of the problems come down to the fact that this can feel very fractured. So the superchain is one, approach, one vision for solving that problem. Now, the wrinkle there, again, this practical consideration, is that if you're going to have that feels like one chain experience, you need to have atomic cross-chain transactions. You need to be, sort of have these trust assumptions that are shared between chains. And so all of the chains that are committed to participating in the superchain have basically agreed with one another to share some shared configuration, some shared standards, so that they can all really trust that everyone is using the same security model, everyone is using the latest version of the OP stack. You can imagine a situation where this is sort of an oversimplification of what could go wrong, but if you imagine you had one chain participating in this network and they're just a bit slow on their upgrades, they're not applying security patches quickly, you could imagine a situation where someone could then, cotton onto that and then target that chain specifically and drain funds from all these other chains that are, following the upgrade schedule and sort of being on time and very responsible about everything. So that's really like the practical, reason why there are these shared standards and sort of shared rules or covenants that everyone who's in the superchain has agreed to follow or abide by or commit to. But again, I want to come back to that difference between the OP stack, which is like totally open, and you could take the OP stack, make a bunch of changes to it, and then even start your own set of interoperable chains that have committed to a different security model or a different set of assumptions. So it really is, I think, a wide open solution space, and there's a lot of flexibility there. There's just these, practical considerations around security for the superchain.
And regarding those rules and regarding those limitations, and I will, full disclaimer, I'm the governance guy, so I kind of know a bit of this, like I've been involved in this. But, there is this set of rules, but it's not like that there is a, enshrined dictator on top of optimism that kind of, goes down and says, this is the way and this is where we are going. How do you approach, with the superchain, with all the partners that you have in the superchain, with the community, how do you approach actually figuring out what the proper set of rules, what the proper set of limitations should be, and where the flexibility should still be there, and where should be the limits so that everybody feels that they are playing the same game? Yeah,
absolutely. Another great question that has a lot of nuance. So the set of rules that everyone has agreed to abide by is something that we call the standard roll-up charter. And the initial stand-up roll-up charter was proposed by the Optimism Foundation, and then it was voted on by members of the Optimism governance community. And the initial values were really based on, things that we had seen work successfully for OP mainnet and Base as well, who are sort of have been historically the two largest chains in the superchain. And so, those were where those initial values came from. That said, anyone can propose updates to the standard roll-up charter, and there have been, conversations that we've had and feedback that we've heard from teams who do want to tweak some of those values and tweak those variables to support a broader group of chains as well. So, it can happen through governance. Yeah, and yep.
Yeah, since we're actually, Bob is part of Superchain, and we are one of the, I think it's really cool, and I fully agree with what you said, OP stack is the cool thing that you can modify, and then Superchain being this common set of standards. For us, for example, we do a bunch of modifications to the OP stack, or we're in the process of doing that while we're part of Superchain right now. I think it's also interesting for chains in the Superchain to push for these changes. So for us, for example, it's very important that we get deterministic finality for our BitVM bridge, which we can't get really with Ethereum. So we need to do some modifications in that way. But OP stack gives us that flexibility to actually do these changes. And then I think it's like an ongoing conversations with OP and the rest of the chains to actually make these changes at some point. And I think it's quite a good approach to say oh, you chain Bob, okay, you make your changes, you want to actually not use the same fraud-proof mechanism, you want to use ZK fraud proofs, and you want to have some sort of deterministic finality on top. Go try it out. If it works well in production and users actually adopt to it, maybe we consider it for our processes down the line. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, just to piggyback off that for a moment, I will say, we love it when chains go out and do experiments and see what works for them. And I think the most recent examples have been with Base, actually, where we set a gas target and a gas limit as actually an upper bound for the superchain. And Base was we think we can go out and push this and scale this. And we were cool, go do a bunch of testing, make sure it's really, really safe. And then we can come back and have that conversation about how to, incorporate those changes back into the standard charter and get the whole gang on board with it, basically.
And from my side, I can confirm that those discussions were happening and they were long. But we will tackle governance and figuring how to come to consensus a bit later on. But now I would like to go deeper into the centralization, because we already have, we have this decentralized systems, open source software with a bit of limitations on top of it. And now I would like to go to a world represented by dcbuilder, because World is one of the chains built on top of superchain. So it is this decentralized chain with certain set of limitations, but also security guarantees provided by being part of the superchain. However, World is also an app. I don't even want to go into the orb and scanning your iris, because that's not my focus right now, but I would like to focus on the app. Because you don't, when you interact with the chain, any chain actually, you don't go and pick it with a stick. You use some kind of an app, you use some kind of a wallet, and in terms of World, they have this super popular, amazing app, mobile app, that allows you to use this chain. However, the app, as any app on my phone, is a centralized piece. So if this is a centralized piece that is managed by World, they control how I interact with it. They control how and who can interact it. There is a friend of mine in this room that has actually been banned from using this app. He wasn't able to use it anymore. So I would like to ask you, Dominik, how do you find this balance? Because I understand, first of all, why and how do you approach it? And how do you find this balance of, being permissionless and being fully open, and you as a company being required to, obey certain limitations, geofencing, stuff like that. And the question is, how safe am I when using World app and World chain, and also as an app developer, how certain can I be that when I'm building a mini app for World, how safe are my users and how safe am I if you choose for some reason to deplatform me?
Yeah, for sure. Also, that wasn't a deplatforming. Like, I was DMing your team member, and it turns out to be just like a bug. So we're triaging it right now. I don't know the cause right now, like what specific thing, but we're debugging it right now. It's not necessarily like, even if we essentially when you're operating apps for we have 27 million plus users on World App across iOS and Android. 12.6 something million have been verified by the orb. And so when you have such a user base and you're operating in the real world, if it was just a simple safe wallet, we have a safe smart account on World Chain for every user. If it was just a safe, then we wouldn't have to do any of the sort of we have a full fraud and risk analytics team at Tools for Humanity, which is the labs entity. I'm at the foundation. And so they do have to build some specific features for mitigating fraud and risk, but mostly when it comes to the World ID side of things. But since World App is a client for both, if let's say you're someone who's trying to spoof the backend or attack the backend, there's people who are really sophisticated attackers that are trying to reverse engineer things. Or use VPNs to bypass geofences and other things. We do have a full-on fraud and risk analytics tool that allows you to detect some of these things happening, and therefore you can quote-unquote ban or shadow ban a user. But for those things, the way that works is that you can still always withdraw funds or deposit funds to the wallet, withdraw funds from that at any point in time for free. All of the transactions that we do in WorldChain we subsidize using either meta transactions or account abstraction. So all of the transactions in WorldChain were always free. And so the fact that he wasn't even able, for context, his teammate wasn't even able to open the app. He opens the app, he just sees a Tools for Humanity logo pulsing, and then it dies, the app, and it just closes. So this is technically just a wrong state of the app, so it's a bug. But usually, even if you're banned, you can always access the wallet side of things. It's just the World ID side of things is the thing that's disabled. And of course, if you're orb verified, we cannot ban you, right? Because we know that you're a unique human with a really high degree of certainty. So the way that we're thinking about this, moving forward, is something that has been really hard is to build multiple clients or allow third parties to build clients, mostly because of the World ID side of things. Because there's a lot of these checks, such as ZK Face ID, that you match your face to the face that was seen by the orb, which is stored on your local device, the way that you encrypt all of these images from the orb, the way that you communicate, because every client establishes a connection with the orb, like an encrypted TLS connection with the orb, to communicate during sign-up to transmit these files. There's a lot of hard engineering happening between the client and the orb, which is really hard to abstract away so that you can have multiple orbs and multiple clients and preserve the sort of security of the users at the same time. And when you're building these systems at scale for tens of millions, hundreds of millions of users, you have we have I think 1.6 million transactions a day, 7 daily weighted average on WorldChain. There's so many things happening. We're subsidizing all these things. It's really hard to build a client for World, TLDR. But what we're working on nowadays is There's this internal sort of effort, we used to call it internally like wallet kit, which would essentially allow anyone to build a front end for World ID. But the question is like, you as a developer, you as a builder, you as a user, how can you know which clients can you trust or which orbs can you trust? So a lot of the efforts that we're going to have when it comes to decentralization in the future is building things like an on-chain registry for orbs, where you have like all the public keys of all the secure enclaves, the registries of the TEs, etc. So that you know like when you're going to a valid orb, or like let's say you have a decentralized client, the client can check against the on-chain registry and know they're talking to a valid orb, and vice versa when the orb is talking to like some client built by a third party that's not Tools for Humanity, and like it's not the vertically integrated sort of like thing that we've had so far. You have to have a way for identifying that that client is actually running some like checksum of an open source code base for a client, or at least some commitment from like, okay, it's coming from a licensed or like some form of like secure and audited, at least so you know it's secure, right? Like you need to have an audit of the entire implementation so you know it's, people are not like being able to like spoof the images, they're not encrypted incorrectly, things like that. It's just a hard thing to do overall.
But I would like to dig into that, because like you mentioned all the things that make it complicated to build a new world app, which is probably true, like I trust you. However, underneath it is just an OP chain, right? It's just an OP superchain chain. So theoretically, I can use your chain, correct me if I'm wrong, but can I use your chain without world app?
Yeah, totally.
Can I use smart contracts that are deployed
it's
there
just
without?
if you get the RPC from anywhere, you run your own node for World Chain, you can use the wallet on Rabby, on MetaMask, on whatever you want. It's just if you want to use World App, and World App is sort of the client, main client for World ID, and also for mini apps, because there's no way for third-party applications to use the applications on top of World App just yet. But part of ID Kit, for Wallet Kit would be that any third party that builds a client for World would be able to use all World features, including mini apps, including the wallet for World Chain, and also World ID.
So, if I want to use your shiny, great, amazing app, which I agree it's amazing, then I have to, go to you. But theoretically, because this is a decentralized technology underneath, like anybody can build their, anybody theoretically could be another app on top of World App to make a, competing app. Of course, they won't be able, at least for right now, to use your fancy iris scan technology to validate human uniqueness, but they could be using this chain, right?
Yeah, for any interaction with World Chain, for any app, for any wallet, you can deploy on World Chain whatever you want. Yeah.
And also I would like to make a reference to what we discussed before, because World is part of the superchain, so it is also subject to all the limitations that superchain is enforcing on top of chains in the superchain. And one of the, for those that are not that familiar, one of the things about superchain and those charters that we've been discussing is there is a certain quite significant portion of those laws that are actually made to secure the users, to enforce the security of user funds on the chain. So even though World is a centralized application run by this, multi-billion-dollar international company, because you are part of the superchain, you chose to obey the rules that are set by the Optimism Collective, right? How do you see it? How do you start, position yourself in this ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, for us, so a bit of a brief background of where we started and how we got here. In 2021, the first time we ever started doing blockchain-related things, the World ID Merkle tree lives on Ethereum, and then we bridge it from there. Like the root of the tree, which has all the public keys of all the verified users, is on Ethereum. We bridge that to other places where we historically were. Originally, we had a rollup, an optimistic rollup called Hubble, which was actually originally built by the Ethereum Foundation, and they do BLS aggregation. And you could do only ERC20 transactions, so just payments back and forth. But originally, then we saw, it was in 2021, so DeFi was just starting, we didn't know if people actually wanted it. But eventually it was clear that people wanted DeFi, wanted other things. So we launched on Polygon POS because rollups weren't a thing, or they were extremely expensive for the scale that we had even back then. So we launched on Polygon POS, we were there for about a year. And then Optimism came along, or Optimism Mainnet. We launched there on July 24th, 2023, where we first launched WorldCoin, the token, and everything else, out of beta. We were in Optimism mainnet for about a year and a half, and during that time, we essentially consumed roughly 50% to 60% of the block space at around peak consumption times. Because whenever we are claiming the WorldCoin grant, is like, okay, you have 14 million, or like, let's say like 8 million monthly active users that are claiming the grant. It's like 8 million transactions. Each of them is a ZK proof. It's a lot of gas. It's like 200K gas, etc. And it was really expensive in the beginning. Then EIP 4844 came along, was much better. And then we did WorldChain in October of last year. And we migrated everything over. So we did 2 migrations, or 3, technically, if you count beta, from Hubble to Polygon, Polygon to Optimism, Optimism to WorldChain. And some of the things that for us are really concerning is like we subsidize all the transactions for our users, right? And that means that we spend a lot of money in subsidizing these transactions. Like when we're in Optimism before EIP 4844, we're spending like $1 to $2 million a month, roughly, on just subsidizing gas. And nowadays it's much cheaper because you have 4844, we have our own rollup, etc. And we have like Pectra, right? The increases block space, and like blobs now are not saturated. But a lot of the concerns for us usually come when similar to Base in a lot of ways. When if you reach true scale, you care about how much price you incur based on the bottom line, like how much cost based on your bottom line, how many users you have, and the minimum price you can pay for all the transactions. So for us, is like concerns around like, is Ethereum DA enough? Thankfully now, like the Ethereum Foundation is great at communicating a lot of these things, and like we have a mutual channel with them to like say like, oh, we need more DA, less DA, and we're coordinating also with people in the Superchain and Optimism to know that, okay, like, are we like gonna fit within the DA? Like, are we able to provide our services within that? Because if we truly cannot provide the service that we want to do for our users at scale, then we sort of need to look at alternatives. But I feel like Optimism in general has like been great at sort of navigating this really complex decision space. Like eventually, if you really have to go and do all DA, you could possibly do that. But like we really want to stay within Ethereum because of the security guarantees and finality and all of those good things. So yes, there's like a lot of moving pieces to assess when making these decisions. But so far, Ethereum and Optimism has been the best place for us, and we're super happy with sort of just how well they've navigated all of these really complex decision choices.
I would like to, to strengthen this. They could have done anything. They have all the money in the world. So if they wanted to create a centralized application, just an app on Apple Store and Google Play, they could do it. But what we are hearing here is that because this technology simply is better and easier to use, they chose to choose this decentralized technology, which is good for us because, like as I mentioned before, we get all those guarantees that are ingrained in this technology because of that. So, it's kind of weird. Centralized, very, very strong multinational company, but using this decentralized, incredibly neutral technology underneath.
One note on that is like, we're not just a company, like Tools for Humanity and World Foundation, we're not just a company, we're building a protocol. If you truly want to build an identity protocol that scales to billions of humans, if you don't make it permissionless, censorship resistant, decentralized, self-custodial, privacy preserving, all of those things, you're never going to reach mass adoption. Like imagine like if the internet was all controlled by either the United States or Europe or whomever, you wouldn't use the internet. It wouldn't be called the internet. It would be like an intra-region net, whatever the hell. Kind of thing. So in general, if you want to reach true scale, you need to go decentralized, otherwise you're never going to reach scale as a protocol. And what we want as part of the World Foundation and the project is people like you to join the world ecosystem and build your own solutions. The orb is open source, the hardware is open source firmware, biometrics, pipeline, cryptography, protocol, smart contracts, everything is open source. We're going to build like tools for allow you to build your own clients, your own orbs, help you with manufacturing, supply chains, grants, incentives, deployment, getting users with mini apps, all of these things. So yeah, I just wanted to say like all of these things are great for that.
Let me park it here. We'll get back to it in a moment probably. But I would like to move to Dominik because like now things get even weirder. We had, we were talking about the decentralized chains right now and build like some centralized components built on top of it. We build those centralized components for the sake of user experience to make things usable for humans. So they figure out that it's too easy with one chain and centralized component. How about combining two chains? And how about building in parallel on both Ethereum and Bitcoin? Can you explain like why and what's the vision?
Yeah, we really like pain and difficult problems. I think one of the big overarching issues with crypto is a lot of the on-chain transactions right now are for a very similar group of users, and in a way, what WorldChain is doing with onboarding a lot of new users, what also Arbitrum and Optimism are trying to do is like, let's actually get new users into crypto. And if you look at which cryptocurrency everybody knows, then, well, it's Bitcoin. So I think there's like a world where, in my mind, there's going to be a lot of infrastructure around stablecoins, and there's going to be a lot of infrastructure around Bitcoin because it's just the biggest asset. Everybody knows it. And in our opinion, the way to bring more people into that is to combine stablecoins and Bitcoin. So what we were doing is like, okay, how do we actually going to achieve that? Where do we have the most stablecoins? Well, they're on Ethereum. Where do we have Bitcoin? Well, on Bitcoin. The big problem being that most of Bitcoin is used on, formerly FTX, or now on Revolut, Robinhood, Coinbase, Binance. It's only like 0.3% of Bitcoin is actually used on chain. Like the majority of people don't use it whatsoever. And that is, in our opinion, also because if you bridge Bitcoin anywhere right now and you use WrapBTC or CBBTC or any of these assets, they're all centralized. You might as well, have cheaper transactions on Binance right away if you have to anyway use a decentralized platform. So we think there's just a lack of combining and solving this Bitcoin security problem with like a decent ecosystem and liquidity. So that's why we started building Bob using OP Stack, but then doing these modifications. Okay, we actually need to have Bitcoin finality. We need to build a better bridge. That's where we're working on this technology called BitVM. BitVM allows us to do fraud proofs directly on Bitcoin. Like you can actually verify ZK proofs on Bitcoin without Bitcoin forks right now. You have to do a lot of tricks to do that, but it's actually possible, and it's going to go to mainnet this year. And I think, as a group, we have figured out how to decentralize payment systems, but we just need to make it a lot better. I think Bitcoin, in terms of scaling it, is probably where Ethereum was like a few years ago. We're just building the systems. I think Optimism, you had the OVM initially, and then you switched out to EVM, and like, oh, this is actually makes more sense. Arbitrum did a lot of innovations with like their WASM contracts. I think Bitcoin is just a bit at an earlier stage, and the route that we've taken is like, let's bring those two ecosystems together because we already have so much innovation happening in the EVM space. Let's just solve that little problem of building more secure Bitcoin bridges and increasing our 0.3% of people that use Bitcoin on chain to maybe 30%, where we are on Ethereum right now. Like 30% of all of ETH is actually used on chain in like DeFi. So for us, it's a huge opportunity to solve that problem. But
how are you going to abstract away the complexity of this? Because crypto is complex already, and here you also now you have to understand that you have two systems that interact with each other, and there are dependencies. Like what if there is a reorg, let's say, on Bitcoin that happened after 2 hours? Yeah. So in the end, architecturally wise, technically, you need to make one chain the one anchor that everybody follows. So in our case, right now it's Ethereum. So we're settling on Ethereum. It's one chain that we use as security right now. We're going to switch over to using Bitcoin as the central anchor, where we have the finalized state commitments, basically. So we can make that secure enough in a way that you need about 50% of the mining power to actually change anything in the Bob system. In our opinion, if Bitcoin fails as a chain, crypto will probably anyway fail. So for us, it's a safe enough assumption to make. Like, if we follow Bitcoin, we're going to be good. But the way that it works basically under the hood is, so right now Bob settles to Ethereum. Right now we are centralized, so we don't have fraud proofs in production yet. But we are working currently with getting the fraud proofs. They're on our testnet right now. But the way that we're actually going to modify it is we're going to have ZK fraud proofs using RISC-0. And normally what you do in a ZK fraud proof is like just proving that your block production was done correctly. And we need to do, what we're going to do is we're going to put an extra bit in there that says, oh, the blocks have been produced correctly, but also there's a commitment on Bitcoin that attests to that, that attests that it's actually committed onto Bitcoin. Because on Bitcoin itself, we can't do
ZK verification.
But you mentioned that you are settling, you plan on settling to Bitcoin. So are you going to verify the block production on Ethereum on Bitcoin network? Like how do you want to achieve that?
Yeah, so basically we have 3 steps. So right now, roll up on Ethereum. Second step is no settlement on Bitcoin, just a native Bitcoin bridge using this BitVM construction. So it's basically you have a commitment to Bob that isn't actually verified on Bitcoin, but it's like basically just checkpointed, and you're going to use the first valid checkpoint, but you do the actual verification on Ethereum, and we leave all the DA on Ethereum. So Ethereum, like if you settle the Ethereum bridge, it just needs to check this additional checkpointing, but you do all the DA proofs on the Ethereum side. And on Bitcoin, you have the BitVM bridge, and the BitVM bridge essentially verifies, is Bob settled on Bitcoin, and are the blocks valid? We're not checking if it's actually settled on Bitcoin, and to protect like against equivocation, so you could have 2 versions of Bob, like one for the Bitcoin bridge and one on the Ethereum side. That's where we are actually using Babylon for Bitcoin staking, because we can make equivocation slashable. So we get like the safe, I know this is a lot of technical detail, but we get safety from a ZK proof, and we get finality and equivocation protection from the Bitcoin staking, because we can slash people for equivocation on Bitcoin directly.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this kind of became a bit technical.
Sorry.
You might think it's complicated because it's technical, but I can guarantee you that at least like complicated, like technical things are understandable. If you put enough time, you can definitely understand what they're doing. Now let's do something more fun. Let's deal with humans. And I would like to ask both Patrick and Tess, because like you are dealing the most with it. You are trying not to just build a technology. You are trying to build a community. And you need to deal with humans. You've got the DAO, you've got the collective, you've got all the coordination issues. You need to somehow make people agree to things that you are doing, and try to gather their insights, try to funnel their views into final proposals. How do you do it? And like my point here, as I'm involved a bit in it, I would say that a bit of centralization in this aspect actually helps. Like it's not that it's a compromise, it's a way of doing things. And I would like you to a bit talk about it, maybe starting with Patrick. Like you deal with this in Foundation, and especially recently we had this controversy about Foundation taking more lead in the DAO. How do you view those things? How do you coordinate humans?
Oh, that's such a big question, isn't it? I could write an essay on this. What's the best way to start? So I think in terms of communicating with the DAO, one is transparent. Well, one, you have to have rapport. Like the biggest thing in the DAO is you have to be able to talk to everyone there, even if it's an uncomfortable conversation. So let's just say we want to do let's just say even like the vision post, for example. We wrote this new vision where after 2 years of the DAO, we took a step back and we looked at the DAO and thought, well, the DAO's done really fun things, but could we improve it? Like, what are the problems? How could we, fix this and make the DAO be better organized? And so even with the vision post, before we published that, we spoke to like a lot of the top delegates to be like, guys, here's like a preview, give us your feedback. Do you like this? Do you not like this? They gave us the comments. And then eventually we made it public and we ran several governance calls where we could talk to the community about it, who hadn't seen it prior to that, and really try to, I don't want to say get their buy-in, but understand what their concerns are and try to fix that going forward. So a lot of it is just like talking to people, making sure they feel heard. And if they have good ideas, then we should just incorporate that and iterate on it. It's not like here's one fixed solution, here's our idea, let's iterate on it until everyone agrees. But yeah, it's just like, it's people problems, it's really hard. This is a lot of talking.
And Tess, how about like things in optimism? You not only deal with random people like me in the internet, but you also deal with partners that are absolutely, I'm pretty sure that, they are so easy to negotiate with, like, Coinbase, Uniswap, World, Kraken. Like, how do you deal with that? And what is the role of the, Optimism Foundation and Labs in this?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I want to begin by just like reiterating what Patrick was saying, actually. I feel like, many of us here have technical backgrounds, and I feel like there's always this desire to just, design a system that will just work. If we just have the right incentives in place, or we just have the right voting model, like, it's just going to work in the same way that like a great system would just work. And the reality is that the people problems, there's often no shortcut, right? You just have to talk to people. You just have to hear everyone out. You just have to, do the labor actually of like having all those conversations. And so, I think that comes back to, how do you work with these partners and where do those pieces come together? It comes down to like our great, growth and partnerships teams that make sure that all of our partners can come to us, can voice their questions or concerns, and then those things turn into those more, technical, broader conversations. Like, what DC Builder was saying about some of the concerns around scaling and ensuring that gas fees remain cheap enough and DA costs remain cheap enough. Those are things that we have taken really seriously. It's been an ongoing conversation with the World team, and then that's turned into, an ongoing conversation with the Ethereum team and other contributors to the Ethereum ecosystem to try to push things forward, like blob scaling and Pectra and peer DAS as well. So lots of pieces there coming together. But I think at the end of the day, it absolutely is what Patrick said. It's just like you just got to talk to people, and there's no shortcut, and you can't design your way out of the hole, right? You just have to do the work.
I will do a follow-up, but I would like to call to organizers because, I don't have time here, and we can go like that forever. Somebody has to tell me to stop at some point. I will just continue because I don't know how much time do we have. Okay, 5. I could have asked 10 minutes ago. Okay, but elephant in the room is that with all those coordination, we are using centralized services, centralized front end, centralized entities. How do you see this as an issue, or rather simply a necessary evil?
I was just going to make a joke. Dennison's there, yeah, Mr. Tally over there. No, there's a bunch of issues, isn't there? So one is. What I'm more worried about is sort of like, let's say Tally, for example, because they're here. What if they go offline? Like, let's just say they, I don't know, their server crashes during a critical vote, and then there's a period where people can't actually cast their vote. That's an issue, isn't it? That's like problematic because people aren't going to go to RBScan in this case and go to the contract and call the function and call the vote. Like, that's going to be too much work. So one is like all DAOs need some form of redundancies where they have like an offline version of the interface that they could load. So I think Tally has like Zero Tally, and there's other, I think even Agora has something similar. That needs to be more widely available now, just in case of those threats. So that's availability. How can people cast their vote on a DAO? The second one is like, what are you voting for? Like, what is that bytecode that you're actually voting for? A lot of the times they're just transfers, so you could decode that, but you have to be semi-technical to do that. And we have spotted mistakes in the past where someone put the wrong number in there by mistake, and then they've had to create a second proposal. And the other one is like software upgrades. Like, that's really hard. Like trying to, obviously in Arbitrum we have on-chain governance. You submit the bytecode, if everyone votes for it, the upgrade executes on-chain. That's difficult to verify, and so you have to rely on audits and third-party data points for a lot of delegates to say, I can sort of trust this and vote for it. And as we saw, like even with Tornado Cash, there was like an upgrade that was approved that had a self-destruct functionality where they destroyed it and then created and hijacked their governance system. So yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on this too, because I think we have many of the same concerns, have seen many of the same problems. And one of the things that we're doing, especially around upgrades and signing, is that OP Labs has actually built a bunch of additional open source tooling that is very simple and should be pretty easy for people to check in and audit, so that all of our signers on our security council and actually anyone who's signing upgrades for any OP chain can go in and use these really simple scripts and tools instead of using, for example, the Gnosis safe front end. And so the Bybit thing, super, super scary. But one of the things that I think has been great about relying on, a much simpler and much more auditable, version of basically signing interfaces is that I think people can go in and just have much more confidence that the thing that they're using, has not been tampered with, and it is effectively a safe front end. No pun intended. But so that's one piece of it for us. And then we actually have also, worked with auditing teams as well to try to make sure that bytecode, is exactly what people think they're signing, just so nothing slips through the cracks. But yeah, it's totally true that many of these things kind of by default are centralized, and the easiest way for most people to access these decentralized system is still through centralized front ends. So I think lots of interesting approaches you can take, though, to try to reduce that risk and give people more confidence.
Yeah, and something like, if I can add from my perspective, like the biggest value of those decentralized systems underneath is that we can actually do things. So if we don't like Tally, like if somebody doesn't like Tally, I don't understand that person, but that person can use something else because Tally is not monopolizing these voting systems. If somebody doesn't like Arbitrum Foundation, then could create their own foundation and ask for the community to support.
Well, they're doing that now of OPCO, aren't they?
Yeah, we don't have time to elaborate on that, but that actually happened. Like, we can just do things. But still, like this centralized application layer aspect is a bit problematic in my opinion. So the last question, because we are actually running out of time, to everybody is, we are building all those decentralized systems. We are spending a lot of time and a lot of effort to figure out super fancy technical solutions to make sure that it's credibly neutral and that it's actually safe and secure underneath. But then somebody is building some application on top of it, and it becomes super popular, but this application is actually secured by a multisig or an even EOA in some cases. How should we deal with that? How should we approach the fact that, and how should we look into the fact that even though we are building those super cool, fancy, rocket science level decentralized systems, then somebody builds, some stupid app on top of it, and everybody falls into that.
Yeah, I actually is a really great question, and I changed my opinion on that throughout my journey in crypto. So my initial thing, I guess most people when they get into crypto is like, oh, let's decentralize everything, and then you start pitching your idea to users and to other projects like, my one USP is it's decentralized, and then everybody's like, yeah, and now what? I don't care. I think when we start with centralized applications, like you need to solve a user problem first. If any one of you used like any decentralized communication platforms, for example, like Element and Matrix, like they somewhat work, but the reality is we all kind of use, I guess, Telegram and Twitter and Discord because they just work so much better. And my argument is that, and maybe that's funny in a crypto conference, but I think our job, like from an ethics standpoint, as project, as we're building these things, first we need to solve a user problem and actually give them something that matters to them, solve the problem in a better way, make it cheap, make it fast. And then it's our responsibility as builders to actually then decentralize every part of it. So I think we're pretty good in decentralizing payments and making that well, but for example, we haven't figured out how to decentralize data very well. Exporting social graphs, like all that stuff is still pretty rough around the edges, and it's our job to do that. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, to reiterate, like for me, it's the same thing. Like for us, we wouldn't get to like 27 million users unless we were doing something that people want to use. But at the end of the day, you cannot ever compromise your values. Otherwise, you're just rebuilding the same system we've had all the time. So yeah, just like build applications that are much better than anything that anyone has ever built before you, but never compromise your values at the same time, and that's the thing that makes it hard, but at the same time, that's the same thing that makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, I'll keep mine really short because we're getting the cutoff signs in the background. I think basically the way to think about this is the software should protect the user 99% of the time. 1% of the time we need to upgrade the software, that's governance, and we just have to figure out better ways to do governance. And the second part is we need more designers. All the UX is awful. Just get more designers, guys, honestly. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, I'm also seeing the timeout signs, but I also want to just reiterate what Dominik said, really. I think the most important thing is to solve real problems for real people. And it kind of then becomes like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing with decentralization, right? Where sometimes you will have people who find ways to solve problems in centralized ways, and then it comes back to all of us to figure out how to, progressively re-decentralize and keep pushing people towards a world where they can have, a lot of confidence and security through that decentralization. So.
Thank you very much. I think that's a nice wrap-up. So I know we are on time, so please give a round of applause to my great guests.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? No. Okay.
Unlikely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry, guys. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I just saw.